and verbal confirmation provided when we are broadcasting.
I can confirm, Chair, that we are now live for Scrutiny.
Thank you very much. Welcome to this meeting of the Scrutiny Management Board. The agenda papers and other relevant information for this meeting are available for public viewing on the Herefordshire Council website. The Council is streaming this meeting live on the Herefordshire Council website. YouTube channel is also making a recording. The recording will be available via the Council's website shortly after the meeting is concluded. There are no members of the public gallery, so we don't need to worry about that. To ensure that recording quality is maintained, could members speak as clearly as possible, keep background noise to a minimum, and ensure that mobile phones and other devices are turned to silent, and also, and I'm doing this myself now, turn their laptops to silent to stop them pinging when Teams messages come in. We do not have any members of the board joining us remotely. Do we have any apologies for absence?
No apologies for absence received.
Any other apologies?
No, not that I'm aware of.
So no named substitutes. Any declarations? Do any members of the committee have declarations of interest in respect to items on this agenda? I'll take that as a no. I would like to propose that we approve and sign the minutes of the meeting held on 26th of March. Are there any proposed corrections from members? Can members of the board who were present at the meeting please vote to approve the minutes to be agreed as a correct record? All those in favour? Any against? Abstain? Thank you. We haven't received any written questions from members of the public or from members of the council. Just before we get into item number 7, I just want to raise a small point. So members will be aware that we were intending to not only look at quarter 4 outturn, but also to look at the value for money provided by Hoople at this meeting. It is not on the agenda, but that is not because I agreed that it should not be on this agenda. I'm satisfied there probably are good reasons in terms of management timing why it shouldn't be on the agenda, but that's not really the point. This committee will always take advice from officers, and it will always work closely with the Cabinet to make sure that we don't interfere with the effective running of the organisation, but ultimately this committee should decide what it scrutinises and when, and it should not be a unilateral decision of the executive. I don't propose to have a debate or a discussion about this, but I would like to invite Councillor Stoddart to confirm this is one-off and will not happen again.
Thank you, Chair. What I can say is that we did discuss that at the last shareholder committee meeting, but I apologise on behalf of the executive, and I give you my assurance that it will not happen again.
Thank you very much. Okay, we'll move on to item 7, quarter 4 2024-25 budget report. In preparation for this, it's become clear that members of the committee would like to get into the interactions between bits of the budget, especially between capital and revenue, which may present a challenge in structuring this meeting in a sensible manner. The way I'm going to take it is we will go service by service initially and look at savings, revenue and capital across each service in turn. We'll pick up reserves, which I imagine will probably need a special kind of overarching point after that. Anything to do with revenue, anything we've missed on revenue, capital, and I think there will be questions on treasury as well. So that's, I'll try and keep us on track in that way. So I want to encourage and enable members to have a conversation and to look to those interrelations, but we'll try and keep to that structure if we can. Okay, so and we'll look at central and corporate together first, then community wellbeing, then E&E, and then children's. That's the order we'll take things. So if we start with central and corporate, I'll kick off by one of the reasons I want to look at this first is it's an area where the biggest bulk of savings not achieved in this year lie. So I'd like to explore a couple of things about why those savings were not achieved, and also if you had known, Cabinet, that you weren't going to be able to achieve those savings, how might you have structured the budget differently at the start of the year?
So thank you, Chair. So obviously the one that you're alluding to very clearly there is the transformation savings of 5.7. It was, as we explained all the way through the year, it was our intention to make those savings through a number of areas. However, we have been unable to make them. We've been very clear in the last few weeks that we've been unable to make those. And we have now done an alternative plan where we have now come up with a reduction across the whole council of 2% to make 5.4 million, so we can still make our target of 10.5.
Sorry, just explain that. So, going forward, you're taking 2% off everybody. So that, I think that's interesting. So obviously looking backwards, one question is what changed when at the start of when you presented the budget to council, you thought that we would make those savings, and then those savings were not made. So there's what changed in that time, and also, I guess I had sort of expected that at least a proportion of the savings you'd be saying we didn't make them last year, but we're confident we'll be able to make them this year. But you seem to be saying those transformation savings just can't be made in that way. Am I understanding you correctly?
Chair, if you're happy for me to provide some information on that. So you will see in the savings element, which I think is Appendix D, those central budget savings amounted to 7.9 in the approved budget for 24-25, and they were split largely across three areas. There was the MERS target, which was the mutual early resignation scheme, and then the transformation savings planned to be achieved through our Thrive programme, looking at the target operating model and targeting third-party spend. What we've articulated throughout 24-25 is the challenge of delivering those transformation savings at a time of managing cost and demand pressures across some of those other directorate budgets. So, for example, within community wellbeing, responding to increasing need for adult social care, and meeting our statutory responsibilities, there has been an impact on how many staff we can safely allow to leave the organisation at that time. The appendix shows that we delivered just under 2.2 million of that 7.9 million target, leaving a balance of 5.7 million undelivered in 24-25, which we mitigated in year to protect the council's overall financial position. We walk through into 25-26 on the 1st of April with those savings to be delivered. And because we were strong and assured in our forecast throughout 24-25, we spent the final quarter and the period since the year end in reviewing the source of those savings in that approved budget, and we highlighted that we would do that from quarter 3 to confirm whether we are still able, given the context of the climate that the council is currently operating in, whether we can still deliver savings from those sources. We've worked closely through CLT and Cabinet in the last quarter and the month since the year end, and we continue to work on our transformation programme, but recognise and are realistic about the fact that transformation savings are not generated overnight, and it takes a longer time to deliver sustainable recurrent savings through genuine transformation. We also recognise, however, that there will be an impact in year if we are not able to deliver those savings, so we have taken some direct and immediate action to respond to that pressure in year, and we alongside working on home to school transport and continuing with the transformation programme, we have identified that we will review all directorate budgets to work towards a target reduction of an average of 2% across all directorate budgets to deliver that saving in year whilst we still continue to work towards transformation.
Councillor Harvey has a question.
Yes, I do. Thank you for that explanation. I'd like to dig into that just a little bit, if you'll allow. I can quite see, and you know, I think members here on the grapevine, which is quite efficient in this place, that you know, maybe not all of the savings that were expected to be taken from the early redundancy programme have been delivered. I mean, clearly there has been an impact in some areas of the council in terms of loss of organisational memory, failure to succession plan, and the impact of losing those senior members of staff with significant years under their belt. So maybe going slower on that is a sensible thing to be doing. So well done you. The overall Thrive programme, however, was sort of 90% not delivered. More than that, actually. And the target operating model savings that were targeted at the beginning of the year delivered nothing. Now, I was very keen for this committee to see savings delivery plans ahead of the budget being approved, just to give some assurance that the thinking had been done and we knew how we were going to go about delivering on those savings. That didn't happen for all sorts of reasons, not least of which because I stopped being chair of this committee. However, those savings delivery plans have never been made available, have never been shared. And, you know, it's, although in a sense, even looking at this as a topic is, you know, looking at the stable door after the horse has bolted, it would be good if this committee could be given some assurance as to what's actually going to happen. Because from what you're saying, you know, because the assumption has been in the way that the budget that we're now working to in this financial year has been put together, that those undelivered savings are kind of built into the base. They're kind of assumed to be there somewhere, and there's kind of no visibility of what the plans are for actually turning those into a reality. Although I hear all the lovely words about, you know, sort of you're obviously thinking about it, but as a member of this committee, even 12 months after, more than 12 months after having originally asked for these sorts of savings delivery plans to be shared, I think it's overdue that we actually receive that sort of assurance that, you know, we can actually poke a stick at this and there is substance to it.
Through you, Chair. So I think we are going a step further than thinking about these savings. I think we have an actionable plan now in terms of the savings that we haven't delivered. You're absolutely right, and for full transparency, the 25-26 budget assumes delivery in full. So as I said, we are walking through the door on the 1st of April with those savings to deliver. The original source of those savings through the Thrive programme, a large proportion of the 2.6 million target S2 in 24-25 related to driving down third-party spend through our contract register. So there was a plan linked to the value of contracts within the contract register at the time that the budget was set to drive out some of that spend. The last financial year was a challenging economic environment for all of our suppliers as well. And whilst we endeavoured to reduce that spend and that activity took place with additional controls through expenditure control panels, we were not able to achieve the savings that we had expected to. We're in the fourth month of the new financial year, and so the time spent since Christmas, since the approval of that budget, has been to consider how we might now deliver those savings recurrently in 25-26. And whilst we continue to explore those opportunities for transformation, particularly in the use of IT, and we're working with a new partner to review those opportunities, in order to ensure that we protect this year's revenue budget, we have taken the view that directorates will, with finance teams, we are working very closely to examine areas of the budget where we can reduce those budgets now to take those savings straight away to ensure that they are removed from base in the current year and therefore carried forward.
Sorry, I was just going to come back and say, but, you know, neither can you, in putting a budget together, and I know because I've done one, just plonk big savings targets on partners like Hoople and just expect them to be able to. There was over £1 million. There was £1 million of savings that was, stated as being able to be taken out of that contract with Hoople. Our close friend and partner. It took the best part of an entire year to agree the service level agreement with Hoople, even for the year that we were in. And I think that's just indicative of, maybe not giving our partners, undeliverable things to do, not talking to them early enough in the process, not genuinely having a properly partnering approach to, delivering on some of this stuff. And it was not a caprice of this committee that we had, the Hoople agenda item sitting here alongside the Q4 budget outturn. There was a good reason for that. And it really is, as the Chair has already said, disappointing, I think that's an understatement, that we haven't been able to look at these things alongside one another. I know the shareholder committee, as Councillor Stoddart has said, discussed it, and there was various commentary that was held because the committee meeting was mostly held in confidential session. But I think it's not a way for us to behave, and I reiterate the request, and perhaps we can consider it a recommendation, that we actually have the sight of the delivery plans for these savings, late in the day as it is.
Councillor Stoddart.
Thank you, Chair. To address Councillor Harvey's points, we work closely with Hoople. We don't dictate to them, so we have engaged with them all the way through the year. So there is that relationship is there, and it was we did believe that it was acceptable for them and us to have those savings planned in there.
But apparently not.
If you'd like to make a recommendation, we can discuss that when we get to that point. Councillor Stark.
Yes, Chair. Trying to link what happened with the capital programme outturn with the savings in this area. There was a million underspent in the IT and Transformation Board spend. I don't know how that translates across to whether that had an impact on some of the savings not being realised on that side or not. And it just opens up the question that I would like to pose today to you, Councillor Stoddart, is how does the executive prioritise what it wants to spend in the capital programme? Is the delivery of savings one of those priorities that you set out as part of the way that you actually decide on what capital is going to be spent where? So there's two questions there. Was this million underspend a factor in some of the savings not being realised on that side? And on the priority side, are you actually prioritising capital spend where it does have an impact to actually drive out those savings as much as we can? Thank you.
So to address your second question at the beginning, as I explained a number of times to this board and to others, including at Cabinet, that on last year and this year, we've looked at our capital programme through a slightly different lens. One of the things we're looking at it through is delivering capability for the people of or delivering of capital items to the people of Herefordshire to make life better across the county, number one. But the lens that we're looking through is such that we're not looking for, normally as you're all aware, capital items, a road, a bridge or whatever, will have a cost implication in revenue. What we have tried to do is to look at these projects through a perspective whereby it will have either cost neutral or cost negative, as in a positive impact on our revenue vote. So that's how we've tried to do with our projects all the way through. And I think you may recall, I've said it a few times on that way through. The actual £1 million of Transformation Board, I'll pass across to Rachel, who will give a little more detail on that.
So the transformation savings that were included in the 24-25 budget, as I mentioned, were around reviewing the way that the council is structured, the MERS target, and examining our contract spend. So those specific savings didn't directly link to the delivery of IT. I think the way that we are now focusing our transformation agenda is around using those digital resources. So I think it will be really important in the future that we ensure that capital spend supports the activity and the revenue budget savings going forward.
Yeah. So, I mean, the IT transformation isn't then about reducing headcount in terms of delivering customer service to the residents of Hereford. It's about doing it in a smarter way. Is that it, Rachel?
I think it will inevitably be both. I think it will be about making efficiencies in the way that we deliver services, whether that is redirecting resource then to ensure that other services are delivered in a new way. But ultimately IT and our digital transformation should support those service efficiencies.
So the two areas, plan and regulatory services software, and the other one, which is smaller, the wide area network delays, that must have an impact then on the savings that we were trying to make last year.
I think definitely the planning and regulatory will be more about sustaining income in that area rather than delivering a saving, and the wide area network, I think that will be more about ensuring that we have got the right digital platform to take the council forward, so not specifically linked to delivery of savings.
I just wondered, Chair, whether there might be a recommendation around at least asking the question of the executive how much they focus on the capital impact on savings delivery.
It sounds like you might be working towards a recommendation, but recommend something rather than ask them.
Okay, right.
Councillor Stoddart?
To address Councillor Stark's point, it's not any of the savings is not a priority figure as we go through. As I said, we're looking to get better value and actually to impact onto revenue, but saving is not a directive. We're not sitting there saying we're going to save money on that. But additionally, to talk back onto the planning software, that's one thing that is obviously very important to us. And the purchase of the new software for planning, not only does it improve the efficiency of the service, but it provides our residents with a better service. So that's what's driving that, not through reduction in people or whatever. In fact, we want to ensure that residents get the right level of service. And I think you may have seen, I certainly have been noticing as requirements are coming through, I'm noticing that the turnaround time is a lot quicker than it was certainly 6-8 months ago.
Okay, we'll move on to community wellbeing next. I imagine Councillor Crockett would like to kick this off.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Sorry, since my laptop's been updated, I cannot stop this pinging when things come through. So please take my apologies. So try and ignore it. Well, what a year it's been, isn't it? And I was hardly surprised, really, that things have cost so much for every directorate, never mind community wellbeing. So the things that I'm looking at or have been looking at are, and we know the real reasons for these overspends. I think we need to make sure the public understand, what's been going on behind the scenes. So for information for residents who are watching and listening to this meeting, I would like to sort of ask the director and perhaps cabinet member or 151 officer regarding the cost pressures being experienced in the Community Wellbeing Directorate. So what are the main causes? I think I'm going to just add to that it's the increased complexity of care and the increasing demand, but there may be some additional information you can give the residents.
Thank you, Councillor Crockett. And I absolutely agree that I think residents need to understand exactly what the pressures are on the community wellbeing budget. So to give you a flavour of this, in 2024, there was a 23% increase in the number of people receiving domiciliary care. There was also a 10% increase in those receiving extra care housing. And then for short-term service users, there was 26% increase on those using Home First, and there was a 50% increase on residential respite care. And then when we come to those using temporary accommodation, at the end of the financial year, we had 104 families in bed and breakfast accommodation. That doesn't include those that are single people living in temporary accommodation, which comes to 156. So that is a significant increase on what we've had before. And at the present moment in time, we don't see that reducing. We are doing everything we can to find other ways of trying to reduce this, and through transformation, try to improve the way that the service is run to try to bring down the costs. The only good point that I can bring out of all of this is at the end of the period, which was the end of April, when the night shelter closed, we had only one person that was known to us who went back onto the streets. Now, that doesn't mean to say that there aren't rough sleepers out there that were not known to us, but the ones that were known to us, only one went back on the streets. But that, again, brings its own cost pressures, because those people that we'd helped during that period of time are now in either one of our hubs or in supported accommodation or something like that. And ultimately, what we've tried to do all the way through this, we probably could, if we'd have cut services, come in on budget. But that would have meant that we would have cut the care and the service that we want to provide. And at no time do I intend, and I know that Hilary doesn't either, to sit over a budget that where it means that we have to reduce the care that we are providing to our residents, some of who are the most vulnerable within our community.
Thank you, Councillor
Hilary, what do you
Gandy.
think?
Just following... Sorry, just following on from that then, you know, you mentioned homelessness and people in temporary accommodation, and I think only last week in the Hereford Times, if you want to read the Hereford Times, there was a big article about how many people are still living in bed and breakfast for months and months, and if it wasn't for the charity venture, we would have a different story, so they say. So I think we've got to look at the whole agenda on this at a later point. But I think as a committee and a cabinet and a council, we have to look at invest to save, so that these people do not have to live in such situations. So just following on from that, and again, I don't know who'd like to answer this. How are these pressures being addressed, and what plans do we have for service redesign, demand management or efficiency measures?
It feels like that's come to me to answer. So I think as you'll be aware, there's a whole variety of things that we are looking at. So, for example, we've had, as Councillor Gandy's alluded to, an increase in the number of people receiving domiciliary care. What we're doing is doing some interrogation of that to really understand what's driving that, because there's an increase. Is that number of hours? Is that 2-to-1 care? Because then if we can really start to understand that, could potentially look at different solutions or different options rather than always going to domiciliary care. So in all of these aspects, we're looking, constantly reviewing the data, constantly reviewing what are the needs coming through. So we know there's huge demand coming through from the hospital. It's about analysing that need coming through from the hospital in order to to redesign, relook at the services that we're providing. We can't do that overnight, but that is part of that continuous improvement, I suppose, that continual reviewing. What are the numbers coming through? What are the needs coming through? Are those needs changing? Do we need to relook at the way the services that we're commissioning? Do we need to commission different services? We know, for example, that our domiciliary care contract framework, the contract comes to an end next November. We're starting the work to look at how we re-procure that, recommission that. Do we need to look at a different model of domiciliary care, perhaps building more incentives around reablement into the framework than we previously had, so that domiciliary care agencies are incentivised, if you like, to focus on reablement rather than just the provision of care. They're all aspects of how we constantly looking to reimagine, redesign the services we both provide and commission. You will have seen, for example, the Shared Lives event last week, which was very much a celebration of the shared lives carers we've got. And actually, we've been able to recruit new carers. Again, that's a different way of providing care, not just the way we've always done it. If we can recruit more carers, that helps generally. It provides a different way of living for people. So it's a constant evolution, I would say, of looking at everything that we're doing. In terms of demand management, every council is struggling with that, if I'm honest. So we're working very closely with the hospital, trying to focus on admission avoidance as much as discharge, because whilst the focus is always on discharge, actually, how do we prevent people going into hospital in the first place? We know that the government is likely to issue new guidance around the model of neighbourhood health that we've seen when it comes out with the 10-year plan this week. And again, I think that neighbourhood health model, the way in which we implement it in Herefordshire, should help us. It shouldn't just be about how it helps health, but actually how it supports adult social care as well. Much more focus on prevention and early intervention. Sorry, I realise I've gone on too long. But there is just to say, there is the huge amount that we're doing to try and manage that overall demand.
Yeah, and thank you, Hilary. I don't doubt your intentions at all, because obviously I've worked closely with you in the previous administration, so I know, you're trying your best with what you've got. And we are forced into finding solutions due to the budgetary cuts from government, etc. So, I thank you for your hard work. This subject is really close to my heart, as you know, adult social care, etc. So we will be bringing this topic, shall we say, to our scrutiny committee in the future. So we'll go into a bit more depth into it then. But thank you for your, and Hilary, thank you for your, and you're going to answer me again.
I was just going to say I welcome the focus that you're giving through the Task and Finish group in scrutiny, because I think that will, again, give us a different perspective and really help us in perhaps bringing in some different thinking around what we can do. So I welcome it.
And I think just to finalise things, it really brings to focus for the general public and our residents, how important this department is and how much we really need it for the safety, etc., of vulnerable people in Herefordshire. Councillor Gandy wants to come in now, Chair. Is that all right?
Everyone knows how this works. It's fine.
Just one comment, really. Well, two comments. One is you made a comment about Venture and the work they do. I think we also, when we're talking about that, we also need to mention CCP as well, because they are another organisation within Herefordshire who work very hard to house people, and I think that's really important that we include them.
But they weren't in the Hereford Times last week, which is why I brought them up.
They may not be, but
no, I know.
I think they should be brought to the table.
But the people of Herefordshire might be looking at the Hereford Times, so that's why
I want to make it clear to the people of Herefordshire that there are others that are doing some good work. And just again, because I've made this public before, but I shall keep on going about it. One of the things that we've done, and I know that Pauline was involved in it right from the beginning, is the virtual house, which if you haven't gone onto Herefordshire Council website and looked at it, you should, and you should push it in all your parish council meetings, because it is really important it shows you exactly what sorts of items that you can buy that technologically will help people to stay within their homes, and in many cases actually avoid domiciliary care, because it will allow them to live on their own with help of technical aids and not actually require domiciliary care. So if you get that opportunity, do look on the website. I thank Pauline because I know she did start this off, but I finished it, and it's a really important thing. And also up at Hillside, we've got the demonstration area there where more technology is being shown to people about what they can do to convert their properties to make it better for people who have difficulties. And again, that should avoid people having to have domiciliary care or going into care homes.
And finally, again, thank you for those 2 plugs, because we can't get it out there enough. But yeah, you need to look at the site. It's really good.
Okay, thank you. Oh, Councillor Stunner.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to come back and remind everyone that what we did last year, if you remember, when we did our reserves review, we moved £11 million from the business rates reserve into the social care reserve and made it very clear that that reserve was there to provide support primarily for children's and adult social care. If
I hate to stop you, but we are going to talk specifically about reserves, so we will come back to that. I have Councillor Bartlett, then Councillor Harvey, then Councillor Fagan. So, Councillor Bartlett.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for your answers so far. I think it's quite pertinent. You know, are we experiencing more need, or are we experiencing different need now, and more complex need? I think, so the question I was going to lead on, actually, Chair, was around the use of reserves. I would like to add one comment here, if possible. That
go on. If people want to talk about reserves, we'll.
So, looking at what we've just heard, you know, we're going to be looking to make 2% across each directorate savings to basically to account for the fact that we can't make the transformation savings whichever way we try and swing it, and that's one way of getting around that, fudging the figures. So we don't make transformation savings, we make savings across the directorates. I do wonder, having put so much more additional money into adults for this budgetary year coming, that we're then going to be using the extra money that we put in and counting them as a 2% saving when we come out the end of the following year. But the one that I wanted to really talk about was the public health reserve. So what worries me is the kind of reserves that we used to say that we came out with a underspend. So 0.3 utilisation from public health reserve. It's public health is everything around that agenda that you were just talking about, that really prioritising prevention. So instead of using money to prevent extra spend, we've been using prevention money to pay for over expenditure. And I just caution where we actually managed to make savings through this year, because I think things like public health really should be spent on public health, not on backfilling holes in the budget. Thanks.
So I can confirm, and I sign a return every year in consultation with the Director of Public Health, that all public health money is spent on eligible expenditure. The reference in the report, utilisation from the Public Health Reserve, this financial year we've got £10.8 million of public health ring fence grant. and there is a plan developed and approved through the Director of Public Health as to how that money will be spent on public health initiatives. That plan is submitted to OHID, and there is scrutiny and challenge to ensure that we spend that money on eligible costs within the council. We had a brought forward reserve at the end of each financial year. If that in-year grant is not spent in full, it gets added to the public health reserve. We applied some of that reserve brought forward to eligible expenditure within the Community Wellbeing Directorate in 24-25 in consultation with the Director of Public Health. So it was not used, we didn't just move £0.3 million from that reserve to offset expenditure in this area. It was applied to eligible expenditure.
So in fact then, Chair, the question is, why are we underspending our public health grant when it could be doing so much good in the prevention sphere? And I think that's, you know, going back to what Councillor Stark said about how we use money to those almost spend to saves, isn't it? So you spend money on public health to save our residents entering Hillary's directorate through a different door and costing more money. So we really need, if we've got money that we're not using, why aren't we using it for the purpose it was put there for?
Anyone want to talk about spending public health money in year?
Sorry, Chair, I don't know that I don't have the detail of the spend or why there was an underspend. I apologise. We can get that information for you. I apologise, I don't have it to hand.
I think just to confirm that public health money was spent on public health initiatives in year by identifying that eligible expenditure. There's a detailed plan for spend of that 10.8 million. I'm happy to provide that in more detail, and we can bring that to a future meeting.
Okay, I think Councillor Barton was trying to ask a slightly wider point. Maybe it can't be answered here, but and maybe there's a recommendation there or something for a future, which is about spending prevention money to prevent. And if it's rolling forward, that suggests at least that we are not spending it as fast as we could, and therefore not preventing costs as effectively as we could. That I don't think it's so much about the detail. Okay. Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. Just to come back to Councillor Bartlett's comment about fudging was the word I think she used. I would like to reassure you that there is no fudging. So the concept that we put in place was we put the £11 million there as a reserve for children and adult social care. This year we've had to, last year we've had to allocate 4 million to cover that unprecedented expenditure. Now that's not there to underwrite and actually add to their budget to the directors and say, carry on. It only comes into application once we've got to beyond Q2. So we were aware from Q2 onwards that adults were in a challenging environment this year, and we therefore, once we'd confirmed through Hillary and through Carol that all of the mitigation actions they had taken, then we were prepared to allow that £4 million to come across and cover.
Yet we're still, from what you said earlier, expecting every directorate to make a 2% saving. So we've put money into the directorate with the expectation that we'll be using 2% of it as a saving.
So we're talking last year, what we're talking now is this year. And what we're saying is that effectively we have accepted that our transformation savings are not going to be able to be delivered. But as I explained at Cabinet 8 weeks ago, that we take a very close eye on this and we'll take every possible step to ensure that those savings are delivered. And this is the result of that action that we've taken swiftly to get ourselves back on track.
Okay, thank you. I do have a bit of a list. So I have Councillor Harvey next, then Councillor Fakin, then Councillor Cornthwaite, then Councillor Stark. I think that may be it for this subject. So Councillor Harvey.
Yeah, Chair, could I just start off by checking what this subject is?
This is this is intended to be looking at community wellbeing, revenue and capital.
Thank you. That's helpful. Residential respite increase, massive, but also hugely important. You know, enabling families who care for their relatives to have some respite themselves. Kind of keeps everything on the rails. I'm wondering the extent to which you feel you have a good understanding of what the building pressures are, particularly in this area, as we keep more and more people, you know, cared for in their own homes. So that's question number one. Just a point of clarification, I hear what you say, Councillor, about the number of families in bed and breakfast, and then you said, but that didn't include single people, which brought it was 104 families, and you said single people, that increased it to 156. Is that 156 single people on top of 104 families, or is it 156 in total? So it's 156 on top of 104 families. And then 52, just to help with the maths. Okay. Well, that's still a lot, isn't it? And I think, again, a question seeking some assurance in terms of sort of grip on the situation. Do you feel that you have a good understanding of the hidden picture in terms of homelessness? Because I think, you know, all of us as ward members have, you know, lots of stories that we hear from our own communities of people who are sofa surfing, where we've now got multi-generational households that, you know, are not able to, you know, sort of split and have their own, the younger generation have their own homes, which are creating domestic pressures and all sorts of other pressures. Do we understand? Do we feel we adequately understand what the true picture is here, in terms of whether you call it homelessness or hidden homelessness, or whether you call it, you know, an urgent need for affordable housing for you know, sort of new generation households? And then the other couple of questions is keeping people in their own homes and caring for them there is a good way of keeping people out of residential accommodation. But eventually they come to the end of the road in terms of how much they can be cared for and kept in their own homes, which means that by keeping them cared in their own homes, they end up being in need of much a higher level residential care when they do enter the system than would have been the case in the days when we had kind of level 1, level 2 sheltered housing available in the good old days, if we call it that. So do we have, again, in terms of understanding the environment, do you feel we have a good enough understanding of that emerging pressure as a bow wave of high level residential care need coming towards us? And where are we at in terms of delivering on the ambition for council-owned residential care facility? And will that, you know, which bit of the residential care market, if we are going to dip our toe back in that sector, would we be aiming for?
She gets paid more than I do. I think, do we know the number of people that are looking for somewhere to live? Probably not. There are obviously families where children with their partners are living with their parents because there is nowhere to live, and we do not necessarily know about them. We will know about some because they will be on our housing list, but we don't know necessarily about all of them. Do we know about everybody that sofa surfs? Probably not. We know a lot, but we don't necessarily know all of them. And again, some of those will be on our housing list. The reasons are complex, many. Some are breakup of marriages, partnerships. Some are parents who can't any longer feel able to have that child or teenager, adult under their own roof and feel it's better that they live somewhere else. Some of it is due to landlord evictions, Section 21 orders, which still hasn't been resolved, and a significant number are in that category, where for no reason, no fault of their own, the landlord chooses to say that they're going to now sell the property. And then there are those who have possibly taken on a mortgage, and then when mortgage rates went up, found they weren't able to any longer pay rents. And we live in a county where private rented accommodation is very expensive. Houses that we are building in Herefordshire, which are classed as affordable, are not affordable for people living in Herefordshire, because Herefordshire has got a very low wage base. And so even with the discounted market value, it still means that many people, particularly in the rural areas, just cannot afford to get onto the housing ladder at all. So there are numerous reasons as to why. We know what we know. What we don't know is what we know we don't know, and that has always been the case, I think.
If I can come back on the respite. So we are doing a project at the moment which is reviewing what the current respite provision is in the county and what are the needs that we have going forward. So we've done some consultation with people who regularly use respite in order to understand what the needs are. And we're also looking at what are the different options rather than just the more traditional respite in a care home or bedded facility. Are there other options for respite? So, for example, I've talked about shared lives scheme, looking at shared days, which potentially gives people respite for the day where they can go to a shared lives carer and gives their loved ones opportunity to have that respite. So we're looking at different options for that respite provision and projecting that forward in terms of need coming forward that we might have. In terms of domiciliary care, not necessarily at this point seeing that emerging pressure into high-level residential, but I absolutely get the point you're making, and that is certainly, we are certainly tracking that. The business case is well developed. We said that we would produce it by the end of the summer, and we're on track to do that. That is looking more at the complex end, where at the moment we are having to place people out of county because we don't have the provision in county. So we're very much looking at that more complex end, acquired brain injury, that and other behavioural and more complex mental health conditions as part of that business case, because that is where we are seeing the particular need. And we're looking at a whole range of data in order to track that need through. I think I've answered the question.
Councillor Snodard.
Thanks, Chair. To address Councillor Harvey's points as well, it's that unconscious and confidence moment, or the unknown unknowns, that obviously we really do struggle with. And it's not just us, that's any council on the land must do. But that's one of the benefits that we do look for from the transformation programme when we actually get it kicking off, where we will actually then start getting business intelligence feeding in and giving some actual sort of figures we can plan to on that. To address the housing issue, you're aware that we've got the £5 million in the capital programme. That's actually delivered Butter Cross in Leominster, which has got 4 flats that will be coming available through to assist with homelessness. And then we're also still looking at buying a property of up to 30, an accommodation block of 30 flats in Hereford that will then look to actually develop, bring through, and then bring homeless people through in order they can actually have a period of time there before they then go back out into the fullness of society. But as part of that, we then generate income from their housing grants, which will then enable us to then offset the £4.4 million we're spending a year on B&Bs and hotels. So that's another aspect to go back to Councillor Stark's point about that prism that we're looking to try and do. So it's not making savings, it's just using capital funding to actually hopefully improve our revenue position.
Councillor Harvey wants to come back. I can't resist any mention of spending capital on housing. So that sounds fantastic. What we are not yet doing is using our borrowing powers to deliver substantial more affordable housing. That is sort of working its way, it seems, quite lethargically through the system. Do we know at what scale we would need to deliver through that programme to make a dent on these numbers? Then I will come back to Councillor Harvey.
Also, if we figure an accommodation block of 30 flats, that will cost approximately £3.5 million. We can offset some of the cost of that with Homes for England. We'll give some cash back. Once that's refurbished and we've then got people living in there, they then pay us their benefits, the housing benefits, which we then use to offset the 4.4 million that we're spending each year.
Sorry, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the potential for delivering a larger amount of affordable housing in the future. What you're talking about isn't going to reduce the numbers of people in temporary accommodation. It's just going to make it cheaper.
I would defer that to the housing development strategy that Councillor Biggs is bringing through over the next few weeks.
Councillor Harvey, sorry for jumping in there.
Yes, and good point, Chair, about that. Yeah, just to remind Councillor Stoddart, you actually removed from your capital programme a £100 million line that you inherited for the development of affordable homes led through the council. 5 million is lovely to see, but that was the 100 million line was equally in there on a, self-funding basis. Admittedly, it wasn't your idea, so I can understand why you took it out. If you want to make it your idea and stick it back in, that would be lovely too. And certainly from the cheap seats, everyone in my group would be very supportive of seeing that line back in there if you're wanting to demonstrate ambition and aspiration in that area. Also, just to be clear, I'm not challenging when we're talking about adult care and well-being on unknown unknowns. I'm keeping it simple and just talking to you about the known unknowns. I'm not expecting you necessarily to be up on the unknown unknowns, but I am expecting some intelligence and understanding and scoping and strategic thinking about the known unknowns.
Which I think the two leaders to my left are adequately and eloquently and I think passionately developing and delivering on.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Fagan.
Chair, both you and Councillor Harvey have actually addressed in some detail the points I was going to make about the housing. And I mean, obviously it's a very difficult situation because if we're trying to keep elderly people in their homes, also a lot of elderly people are actually sitting in 2, 3 or 4 or 5 bedroom homes. So that investment in actually providing better accommodation for people as they get elderly so that they can actually move out of those homes so that we can actually free up some of that element of housing. I see that it's a double-edged sword, but somehow we have to actually take action in what is actually a crisis and an emergency. All of those families that are in temporary accommodation will be costing a lot more money never mind the actual social impact on them, but a lot more money to support. So actually it is within our interest to actually sort out this housing crisis. I think Councillor Harvey's made a good point about the 100 million line that was taken away. And I don't think that the 5 million that is here is actually going to sort this problem out. It's just going to sort of deal with what we know is there at the moment. But we all know as councillors that the problem is immense, and it needs to be tackled with some real creativity and some real investment, because otherwise we're not going to get out of this hole, and we're going to be feeling the cost of this for years and years to come.
Councillor Gandy?
A point which doesn't actually solve the problem, but it's a sort of small pin into this situation. Just off Roman Road in Cathedral Close, I think it's called, or Cathedral Place, there is a 80 apartment building for people who are over the age of 55 and have a care plan, who can go into one of those apartments which will receive full care and the full technology that's available to them. And of course, if they're on housing benefit or any other form of benefit, then it's available to them. It's a really, really nice building. And also, if you are over, I think it's 65, and you are living on your own, and you feel, as they would put it, lonely or isolated, there is an opportunity for you to possibly sell the property that you are living in, which is partly what Tony was talking about, and move into one of these apartments which contains not just the bare things that apartment blocks normally do, but it has got a really nice community area. It's got a hairdressing salon. It's got a physiotherapy. It's got it enables people as they get older to receive the care that's required for them. It's a very small start. It's a work that's been done in conjunction with Herefordshire Council and Platform, but it's a small start. But it is actually 80 apartments that are available for people who either want to downsize or who want to go into somewhere where they can be looked after in their old age.
Okay, thank you. I have Councillor Cornthwaite and then Councillor Stark, and then I think that will be it for community wellbeing at the moment. Councillor Cornthwaite.
Which is a question turned into a comment now, because thankfully Councillor Stoddart answered the comment that I was going to make, which was, I hate the expression that we would suggest that the finance team, whether they're officers or councillors, would fudge the figures. So thank you, Councillor Stoddart, for clearing that up, because I think unless we know somebody's fudging figures, we may not even really suggest that. Thank you also, Councillor Gandy, for mentioning that lovely place that's in my ward and which I've offered full support.
Do you have a question at all?
No, the question was answered.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Stark.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I just want to stay with this theme of capital spend in terms of directing it towards making savings, or at least taking pressure off the revenue budget. And I'm looking here at the 24-25 capital programme for community wellbeing. And I also took the opportunity to go back to an induction piece that I had and other councils had in 2023, where it talks about prevention and support. Occupational therapy, providing aids and adaptations to help people stay safe and independent in their own homes, reduce costly care packages, delay need for residential care. We all agree that. And we talked about technological enabled living. When I looked at the capital programme for 24-25, I couldn't really pinpoint how much money or capital we were spending in this area. Now, I accept some of the expense has to be met by the residents themselves, but surely if there's a gain to the council here, why aren't we spending far more money in this area if there's a real benefit to be had? should we not even be more generous and not always ask the resident to pay? Because if at the end of the day we are going to reduce revenue pressures for all council taxpayers, then perhaps that's an area we need to look at and focus on. I just couldn't see from the capital programme how much has been spent in this area, and therefore the question is, are we spending enough, and did we spend enough last year, and should we spend more?
Some of it would be through the Disabled Facilities Grant, which is in the capital programme, and we get a sizable amount from government each year. That does both physical adaptations, but also contributes as well towards technology and aids and adaptations around there. We also have a provision within the Directorate Capital, which is around our technology-enabled care programme, which Councillor Crockett will be aware of, that we use specifically around technology-enabled care. I haven't got the exact figures to hand, but I happily share those with the committee.
Yeah. But do you think we spend enough money in this area to get the benefit of the prevention activity that we could get from reducing the pressures on the revenue side?
I think we could spend more, certainly on technology.
Right.
And certainly seeing a lot of the work. We've mentioned the virtual house today. That's already spearheaded a lot of interest. But I think there's much more as technology evolves that we can use, and that we could potentially spend more in this area to reduce the costs in terms of our revenue costs. And
just before you come in, Rachel, if I could ask Councillor Stoddart, it's back to this focus. I accept, Councillor Stoddart, that we want the capital programme to make residents' lives better. I accept that. I think we all agree that. I'm just really trying to focus on whether we make enough use of capital spend to reduce the pressures on the revenue side. And again, as we've just heard from Hilary, we could spend more here. And I just wonder whether you're satisfied you're focusing enough when it comes to the decisions on capital spend priorities on that spend to save element.
The easy answer is, of course, we want to spend more all over the place, but we have to live within the means. It's very much, we adopt the approach of we can do anything, but not everything. So therefore, we have to look at our priorities, and I believe at the minute, we have a balance, which I think is equitable across each of the directorates.
But we've just uplifted the community wellbeing revenue budget by 20%. I mean, that would, to me, would seem to be a priority area for looking at what we could spend on the capital side to actually avoid us having to do that.
Councillor Gandy?
Yes, just to make a point, with regards to the Disabled Facilities Grant, we have virtually spent last year all of the grant now, and we certainly intend to do so this year. Now, according to officers, previous years we have underspent on the grant, and in some cases significantly underspent on the grant, which I just do not understand. And I was determined when I came in that we were absolutely going to spend all of the grant, and we have done that, all bar about £558,000, which came in a bit late, and too late for us to spend it before the end of the financial year. But I think it's important. There's no point in putting extra money into a capital programme if you're then not going to spend it all. And that was what was happening. And so what we've done is we are now spending what we're getting and making sure we spend it all. And that will be the case going forward. And certainly I will be fighting along with others, I suspect, with Councillor Stoddart, to ensure that we get our fair share of it, because you're absolutely right. The more that we can do to prevent people having to have care packages or going to care, the better. But there are lots of other things that we can do other than the Disabled Facilities Grant. There's lots of other work we can do, both locally, through Talk Community, through other means of prevention, and the work that Public Health is doing around vaping and people vaping and smoking and all these sort of things, which may not seem important when you're in your 30s, but they're going to be sure they're going to affect you, as they have me, when you're in your 70s.
If I can just correct Carol, Councillor Gandy's, that was virtual fighting. We're not physically in the gym with gloves on. Thank you.
Thank you for that very important clarification. Thank you. Rachel?
Thank you, Chair. So just to support Councillor Gandy's comment around the spend on the Disabled Facilities Grant, we spent just under 3.3 million in 24-25, and that underspend largely related to the timing of the award of the final element of that grant. To address your comment, Councillor Stark, on the review of the capital programme, one of the ways in which we've strengthened our internal budget monitoring in the last quarter is to bring in an enhanced focus around the delivery of the capital programme, aligning it to the context of the revenue budget pressures. So we are bringing that oversight, that check and challenge that we apply and have applied really well, the expenditure controls around revenue budget arrangements and monitoring to that capital programme. We've just finalised the budget timetable for the development of the 26-27 revenue and capital budgets, and we've now got quite a well-practiced tool for reviewing additions to the capital programme, proposed additions, and that process has started with conversations in directorates and through directors. As Councillor Stoddart mentioned, we have a lens that we analyse those proposed additions. Will they deliver the priorities of the council plan and the delivery plan? But more importantly, and gaining more importance, is will they address the revenue budget pressures that we are seeing? And we'll do that work in the context of the 24-25 outturn, but also those emerging pressures that we see in Q1 to make sure that we're best using those resources through the capital programme to alleviate those revenue budget pressures.
Okay, thank you. That was going to be the end of it. Councillor Crockett says she has something very quick.
Yeah, sorry. It's regarding the aforementioned Cathedral Park, Councillor Gandy. Did we invest in that property or not? And if we don't, I think it's a really expensive way to move into a retirement place. It's £1,500 a month for anybody who's not on benefits. If they are on benefits, I'm not sure what the cost is. And out of those 80, I'd be interested to know how many are filled, because it has been open for several months now, and every time I go by, it's in darkness.
Councillor Stoddart?
Thank you, Chair. I'm not addressing Councillor Crockett's point, but what we'd like to do is just come back to one of the points that Councillor Harvey mentioned, to be the £100 that was removed, or the £100 million that was removed. My understanding is that's not quite correct. It's £20 million that was removed. It was never fully funded. It was funded through sales or rent, and in the 4 years that it ran, only 220k of it was spent. So actually, I think the £5 million we've put where most of that's being spent, I think is demonstrating that we're actually we're putting our money where our mouth is. Thank you.
Okay, Hilary.
So I was just going to say that we haven't put any money into Cathedral Park, sorry, in direct response to your question. The rents are quite high. I haven't got an update in terms of take-up at the moment, but happily do that and provide that to you.
That'd be really helpful. Last I heard there were 8 filled. 8 out of 80 is not a good number, and I didn't see it in our capital, so that's why I asked the question.
Okay, thank you. We'll draw a line under community well-being and move our attention to economy and environment. I wonder if Councillor O'Driscoll or Councillor Stark have any points to make on.
Thank you. I mean, a lot of the savings, fortunately, have been achieved. So, start with a well done, which is nice. I did want to touch on the inflationary increase in fees and charges. I mean, it was an inflationary increase. Inflation didn't suddenly go up in the last 12 months. Could I just dig into that a little bit more? Why did it go up so much? If we could understand that a little bit. I know it's a small amount compared to some of the figures we've been talking about, but it could be it could help to illuminate how things are budgeted. Yeah, which will be useful for me. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor, through you, Chair. I'll need to check exactly the figure now. I can't remember the exact percentage, but there was agreed, I think it's about 5% we agreed across all increases for the year. So as part of budget set in for the 24-25 year, we agreed that there'd be a flat rate, 5% on all fees and charges. We considered a few if there was any sort of risks of those sort of taking us too far outside of sort of market value, but the majority was set at 5%. So the overall budget on our fees and charges was then sort of added, increased by that 5% as well.
So we budgeted for 5%, and so what does this actually represent? This overspend or undersave, however we want to look at it.
Happy to take that. So and I'm just confirming with my team, I think the underdelivery of that particular savings target was linked to a reduced activity data rather than a reduced increase in the fees and charges. Moving forward into 25-26, then that underdelivery as at Q1, I think we are now confirming that has now been delivered in full because the activity data has now come through to provide assurance over that particular saving.
So that might be, and we might not have got the money we were expecting to get from parking charges, or we might not have got the money we were expecting to get from planning applications, rather than it being an inflationary issue whereby we hadn't budgeted for the fact that it was going to go up by a certain amount.
Correct.
Thank you, that clarifies that. Are we looking at capital as well while I'm here?
Yes, we are. And if you can link them together, even better.
Miracles take longer. We'll have a go. I just want to touch on the Section 106, really, if that's all right, and the fact that there's still a lot of unspent Section 106 fundings, and why are they so delayed? Why are they undelivered? What are we doing to remedy that? How can we make sure we haven't got a traffic jam of Section 106 projects, and we can make sure that that money's being spent, and people can see that it's so important that residents see this money being spent, because the houses are springing up around the county, and these are important projects that we can point to and show they are needed to help in some way mitigate the impact of the housing on these communities.
Just before that, Rachel was kind enough to share a spreadsheet looking at Section 106 spend and accruals over the past several years, and I like a spreadsheet. So based on looking at that, on average, we've been kind of accruing Section 106 money at about £2.5 million a year, and in the most recent year, we spent about £2.7 million. So it's starting to go in the right direction. But if we don't accelerate that very fast, then we will carry on with it will take us years and years and years to spend down the backlog. So from my point of view, this year was an improvement, but what are we doing to radically improve that? Councillor Harvey had her hand up. Was that about this, or was so? If you want to join in on the Section 106 as well, while we're
Yeah. Well, while I was cabinet member for finance, I got the financial regulations amended to enable the council to effectively sort of borrow forward on what is the expected Section 106 developer funding, which is expected from particular developments, so that we're not delivering infrastructure in arrears all the time, because quite understandably developers have a Section 106 payment profile which matches the build out rate of the development, so they don't pay all the money out up front, and yet quite a lot of the infrastructure that is being funded through Section 106 in order to mitigate the impact of that development can come forward more cost effectively alongside the development sometimes, if it's a case of things being developed at the edge of the development, things that the developer could actually kind of pay themselves or be paid by us to do through Section 106 whilst they're actually working on the site or adjacent to it. And also to make sure that, those mitigations come in as the houses that they're supposed to be mitigating and the residents inhabiting them are coming on stream. it was something that kind of took a while to deliver during our administration and to bed in, and I'm just wondering the extent to which that facility has even started to be used by your administration, and if not, why not?
Councillor Fagan and Councillor Driscoll want to add to the section 106, and then we'll open it up to answer all of these points. Councillor Fagan.
Thanks, Chair. The question really is about the Project Management Office and the Section 106. That PMO was absolutely crucial in helping to deliver the 106, Section 106. And so I'm concerned that the revenue changes, sort of making everything fit, and the changes to the Project Management Office are actually going to set us back in terms of the delivery of the Section 106. So the question is around that.
Yeah, to back up that, obviously, what the office does is really important, and how we make sure that that continues to work at maximum, if not improved capacity. But also, just to back up what Councillor Harvey was saying there, I wasn't fully aware of that initiative from the previous administration, but I would say with all of the houses that we're looking to deliver in Herefordshire in the coming years, that seems like a very, very sensible suggestion for a way of bringing the population of the county with us on this journey, which is going to be a huge task.
Okay, who would like to speak to Councillor Swinglehurst?
Well, I'll make a start because you're quite right. It's better than it was, but it needs to do a lot more. I think the money's coming in, the money's going out. It needs to accelerate, but there are multiple reasons why. Sometimes projects get hung up, and it's not all to do with us. It can be do with external factors, which we can't do a great deal about. But yeah, overall, I completely accept the point, and I would like to see that going out a lot more. But I mean, because I think we're all aware that when a development happens and it has an impact on a neighbourhood, you want to see that the positives coming through, so people can see that actually, they have a school, or they have a new classroom, or they have a open space, or whatever, something that they wanted. So it's frustrating to know that there's this considerable amount of good waiting to be done. So I very much take that point. As far as I'm aware, the changes shouldn't be affecting the pace of out, but we probably need to look closely at how can we accelerate the pace of delivery and overcome some of those external factors that are making it difficult. I wasn't aware of the point raised by Councillor Harvey, and I'm grateful for that insight. So I'll pass over to colleagues.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. So, Councillor Harvey, the mechanism that you referred to that was implemented by your administration is absolutely still there through the capital guidance notes, and we would exercise that right through the capital guidance notes in consultation with legal to make sure that we were able to spend linked to the stage of development, etc. So that mechanism is absolutely still there. I think what members are highlighting is the challenge in delivering, and it has improved in the last financial year, and that has been linked to the dedicated resources that have been in place. The review of the Programme Management Office, PMO, has been undertaken with a view to best align resources within that team to make sure that they are delivering priority projects, and that has been done in consultation with directors to understand those needs, and therefore that has been done in consultation with Economy and Environment to make sure that we have the right resources available to deliver and continue to deliver and accelerate those Section 106 projects.
Okay, if I can come back on that. So in my ward, actually, there's been a project's been on a 106 money running for 6 years. It's now actually in delivery. It's the Port House Rise footpath from outside Bromwood into Bromwood Town Centre. Again, as I say, it's been hanging around for 6 years. It's now on contract, and we're expecting the road to be closed in the next few weeks and hopefully delivered in August. So that's just one example, and I think you'll see that the so-called bubble has been addressed, but it's constantly got to be addressed. We're doing everything we can to ensure that that bubble is actually compressed as we go on.
Several members want to come in on this, but I'm just going to jump. So you say you're doing everything. Can you tell us a little about what it is that you're going to be doing to accelerate the spec, because if this year, like I say, was an improvement, but really the spend needs to be accelerated. So what is it? Just give us the top 3 things that the Cabinet is focused on. Go ahead, Ross.
Thank you, Chair. I probably won't speak on behalf of the Cabinet, but I think and maybe not 3 things, but I mean, to pick up the points, and they've been covered anyway, certainly we are seeing that slight improvement. I take the points in terms of 2.7 over 2.5 million in terms of the additional 106 coming in. I think when you look historically, and as Councillor Stoddart just mentioned, the historic backlog that we had has been the challenge really to try and address that. Certainly the specialisms that we've had within the PMO, as Councillor Fagan mentioned, has been fantastic, and that's, without doing that, I don't think we would have moved this forward at all. But I think it also helped us realise that it is a specialist role. It wasn't just a project manager. We needed that quality in terms of the sort of QS, the design, you know, sort of to build out the schemes that we needed, and to make sure that was costed properly as well. So one of the things that has changed, and you've seen the report recently in terms of the professional services partnership that we put in place, and the changes that will be around the future public realm contract, the sort of the insourcing of the professional asset management teams that will come and join us. That will certainly help us be on the front foot really, because that will be an in-house team that will do a lot of the design work, do a lot of the costings, and make sure that they're project managing it as well. At the moment, I'm not saying it's not a criticism, but some of that sits with Balfour Beatty, some of it sits with us, and there's that sort of crossing of projects at different times. And on top of that, and certainly taking that point around sort of forward spend and thinking about some of those developments and working with the developers as well, quite often it's easier for them to just do it there and then, rather than give us the cash and we have to go back and do it at a later stage. So anything that we can put into the agreements to make sure that it's delivered on site by the developer or someone for them, we can do that at the same time.
Okay, Councillor Harvey wants to come back, and Councillor Driscoll and Councillor Thomas wants to come in. So we'll start with Councillor Harvey.
Yes, first of all, I'm grateful for the assurance that the mechanism still exists. Can we start flexing it, please? Start using it, because one of the issues to do with moving the backlog, if you refer to it, it's just in money terms, the money is paid in, but sometimes we're not in a position. The PMO team and the Section 106 delivery team are not in a position to be able to plan to deliver the money, because the money isn't sufficiently paid in to enable the works to be commissioned without invoking that flexibility that's in our financial regulations. So it may look like there's a large amount of Section 106 money that's just sitting there, but actually it's pooling and ticking up to the point where there's actually enough there to do what was intended to be done. And lots of it is already committed in terms of the heads of terms agreements for the planning permissions, which actually stipulate what that money has to be spent on. So it's not like it can go on everything and anything. But you know, it is a frustration to the PMO delivery team and to the communities that these developments are sat in, that infrastructure does not get delivered alongside of the developments coming forward, rather than years in arrears.
Councillor Thomas next.
It's on the 106. I've got a fairly large scheme in my ward, nearly 500,000. It was handed on to ACOPS, I believe, and they've taken 12 months to design a road system that, quite frankly, a couple of highways guys could have almost delivered in a week. It's just quite ridiculous, the length of time. They obviously got too many projects on the go. It's doing. Really, it could be very quickly done. I'm not exaggerating that. It could be quite quickly designed. I know the roads, the area very well, and it's quite simple.
Thank you. Councillor Driscoll.
Thanks, Ross. My concern is that there's changes been going on in the PMO over the last few months. We're losing experienced staff who have been fundamental in helping us to move forward a lot of these Section 106 projects. And now we're saying it's going to be rolled into the next contract, which isn't going to start until next autumn, is it? Until September next year, when we're going to be looking at bringing some of that stuff in-house. So we're going to have a period of 12 months where we're not motoring forward. At best, we're standing still where we are, and we're not addressing the backlog. I'm also concerned that we have effectively, unless I'm completely wrong, I know certain officers are either in the process of leaving or have left as of June the 30th yesterday. I think quite a few people left at the end of the first quarter or were going to be leaving. Are we bringing in external staff to get us through this period between now and the new contract happening in autumn next year?
Yeah, thanks, Councillor. Perhaps my answer wasn't as clear as it should have been. So in the future, we will be in a better position because the separation of the contract for the public realm, sort of frontline delivery, and the in-house services. So for next year, you're right, it will look and feel very different. But that's not the same as right now. So we've already agreed that we'll go out for a professional services partnership anyway. That's part of the sort of redesign of our sort of capital programme and how we support that and how we will bring in a partner to work with us on a number of schemes. So that resource will be here and now. That's something that we're going out to the market straight away to bring in that new partner, and that will make sure that we've got the resources in place. And yes, we are filling the post that we need for the 106 team. It is separate, slightly separate from the PMO review, because we've said it is those specialist resources that we need. It's not directly impacted by the PMO, but it has to be funded from within the 106 funding. We can't suddenly say we need more money there unless we can fund it from the projects that we've got.
Well, the Section 106 is bringing in a lot of interest on an annual basis because it's not being spent. I'm sure that would more than... And actually, we did bring that up at Connected Community Scrutiny, that there was a lot of interest on that money that could be used to employ staff to get that backlog down.
Councillor Driscoll's point about release of officers, they were interim officers. They were very expensive resources, which we've now we've used to get that bubble going. But in order to get value for money across the whole of the workforce, we've now released them, as you just said, at the end of the month.
It's not value for money if the projects aren't being delivered, though.
Councillor Fagan will have the last point
It's
here.
just a quick one. Can we have an assurance that the projects that were promised to our residents to be delivered in the summer, which I think is here now, will those projects be delivered this year in the summer?
So, again, with the officer that has now left, he managed the project in Bromwood that I've mentioned earlier. That is in the process of being delivered, and I'm assuming, therefore, in line with that, all the other projects are due to be delivered this summer will be aligned and delivered. But I'll just check back with Ross.
Yeah, thanks, guys. I can happily talk to you about specific projects if there's any questions, but yeah, we're not seeing any real delay in terms of the programme for the 106, but I'm happy to pick that up outside the meeting if you wish.
Okay, I'm just going to... I think we have demonstrated... I think Section 106 is an example of something that doesn't really jump out in the capital programme, because with the amounts of money we're talking about are not huge compared to some of the other things that are there. But I think this reflects the kind of importance of these projects beyond their money, and so I think we have demonstrated. I'm sure it would be the same if you've got any group of members in the room. Councillor Stoddart.
Thank you, Chair. Whilst they may not be seen in the capital programme, what I would like to draw your attention is we mention them every quarter in the performance report. A lot of that first paragraph, that first section, is a lot of 106 projects that are delivering, because, as you say, they're vital. There are a lot of good work going on that if we don't bring it to the public and the council's attention, it just carries on. Level crossings at schools, small buildings at schools, it's all that sort of stuff that is actually being delivered and it's going on.
Okay, we have more to talk about in environment and economy, but we have been doing this for 94 minutes, so I'm going to suggest we take a short break, and then when we resume we will finish off environment and economy, we will get to children's, thank you for bearing with us, and then reserves, treasury, anything else that we have missed, and then we'll get into recommendations. So it is 25 to. Let us be ready to go at 1:45. Can we confirm? Okay, we're back. I'm looking for everybody's attention. Right, we're back. We're going to go straight on, carrying on, talking about revenue, capital savings in environment and economy. And Councillor Stark wants to kick us off for this section.
Yeah, thanks. Ross, you know, my concerns in the past has always been that when there's pressures in children, when there's pressures in adults, that pressure then translates into a hit in economy and environment. And I just want to explore that again by looking at the revenue outturn for 24-25. It's Appendix B for anyone who's interested in looking at the detail of it, particularly for those looking in. And it's the part that covers economy and environment. It's a very interesting table, Ross, because what you've got there is, at first sight, a good outcome, but it hides that there's a big lump of overspend that's been offset by a big lump of underspend. Send Transport was sent to you from Children's Services. And if you look at the overspend for 24-25, you've got a 2.2 million overspend in the Send Transport itself and 1.1 million overspend in home to school transport. That's been offset by a lot of very fortuitous underspends across a range of other areas, which, if that underspend could have been translated into perhaps more spend on other areas of economy and environment, that might be quite useful. So my first general point, Ross, is how much risk is there now to the economy and environment revenue allocation for 25-6 and going forward by you having taken on this perennial headache of an overspend in the Send and home to school transport area? Because what concerns me is that you'll end up in your directorate having to make cuts elsewhere to overcome inevitably the overspend that we're facing and going to continue to face in this area. So that's my first question, and I wonder what your observations might be on that. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor, and Rachel will probably comment as well. I think certainly the decision was taken that E&E would take on the budget, particularly because we were the main spenders of the budget. I appreciate it is one of those sort of main things that sits across the whole council in terms of children's and education and the process of who's entitled to what transport and then the cost of it and the provision of services as well. But ultimately my teams were the ones going to the market, procuring whatever the routes were. So there was we needed to make sure that everyone understood where the pressures were. So I was comfortable that it moved across. Certainly, as I said, the work that Rachel and her team then did, because whilst it's sat within E&E, it is purposely sat below the line on a separate budget so that it's not a direct impact on a sort of daily basis, and we monitor it slightly separately. Take your point in terms of the overall ins and outs over the year has sort of helped balance that out, but I think I'd be comfortable in being able to report back separately where we are on Send and home to school, separately from the actual revenue implications on my services.
Rachel?
Yeah, just to support what Ross has already said, this is a national pressure and one that this council is facing as well, and we can see that there was a 3.4 overspend in 24-25 in home to school and SEN transport. We've presented it throughout the year on a separate line to be transparent about it and to highlight that risk of that emerging pressure, and we'll continue to do that throughout revenue budget monitoring in 25-26, again to highlight and separate. So in the context of the overall E&E budget, the E&E budget delivered an underspend in 24-25, and the home to school transport and SEN transport delivered an overspend. They're not offsetting each other, although I accept that in Appendix B it is presented that way.
So if there's an overspend in the Send transport and home to school transport area again this year, how are we going to actually offset that generally in terms of the overall revenue budget?
Yep, happy to take that. So in Q3, we highlighted, and as part of the budget setting, the Chief Executive commissioned a dedicated review of our home to school and SEN transport arrangements. That's linked to a 200k savings target that was not delivered in 24-25. And since that time, we've worked with an external consultant and the newly appointed service director within Ross's directorate has now assumed SRO, Senior Responsible Officer, for that project. So we are working at pace now to address that project. I think we've put what we call a gold sticker on it. This is a gold priority project for the council, which means that it has the highest level of priority. There's a dedicated project board that is doing some work at the moment to understand the data. On top of that, there is a separate bi-weekly meeting which includes myself, the Chief Exec, and the SRO, Gemma Dando, and we regularly receive an update on that planned activity. What I will report is that that target of 200k, following the work of that review commissioned by Paul Walker, we have now stretched that target. So the amount that we consider we will be able to deliver in 25-26 is 500k instead of that initial 200k. And that will be achieved through efficiencies in our contracting, through commercial negotiations, which I won't go into the detail of, but we are very much expecting those savings to be achieved over the next 2 academic terms, and they'll be achieved without any direct impact to the service users.
So are you saying that this, and I assume it's capital spend through the project, is it capital
no,
spend
this is revenue budget
transport
savings.
fleet?
We've got a transport fleet that's part of the second phase of the delivery plan that we're working through with this project. We've unpicked the data in great detail, the activity data, the forecast activity, looking at our contracting arrangements, the number of routes, the mileage per route. We've got some detailed data on this now. Obviously, that data is at a point in time, and there's now an emergent need to act on that data before it moves again in the next academic term. So we are doing a lot of work analysing that data and working across commercial services colleagues, transport colleagues, education colleagues, to bring that piece of work together and maximise the impact over the next 2 academic terms in terms of the revenue budget pressure. The second phase of that work will look at the way that we use the amount that we've put into the capital programme, the 350k, and determine which type of vehicle over which type of route that money is best spent on. If the results of the review highlight that there is a greater requirement for a council-owned fleet, we will consider, in addition to the capital programme, recognising how that will impact on the revenue budget pressures.
Okay. Thank you. So we are addressing that overspend, and we're not expecting it to have to be absorbed by E&E. That's what you're telling the committee today. My second area, Ross, is around planning. I noticed that in the revenue table, the overspend on the planning side is really an underachievement on income, isn't it? Underachievement on income received. Is there any link between that and the capital outturn that meant that we actually didn't spend anything almost on the planning and regulatory services software? Was that software upgrade meant to help us to achieve income at all, or not? It's just a service delivery benefit, isn't it?
I would just say, I think Ross would like to come in as well.
Right.
Thank you, Chair. I was happy for Rachel to take any other questions. So the answer is no. So, and you may recall we had a conversation, I think, when we looked at the budget setting for this current year, and we talked around the rebaselining of the planning income budget. We did a lot of work across some sort of benchmarking across the country to make sure that, firstly, was it an underachievement? Were we not delivering or bringing in the income that we need, or were we more expensive and over-resourced in terms of other comparable councils? From that work, we were then able to work with finance colleagues to actually show that over time, the base budget just hadn't really, or the income target had just sort of stepped away from where it really needed to be. And so year on year, it continued to grow, and we were never going to catch that up. So as part of the base budget setting this year, we were able to sort of get that back to as it should be. There's still a stretch target in there, so we haven't sort of in effect reduced it by the total underachievement. And planning colleagues are working to make sure we do maximise income, but it's purely down to that sort of historic. It just got itself slightly out of line, and we've managed to now bring that back to a sort of comparable place.
So we're not expecting that sort of underachievement this year?
We shouldn't do no. Again, we're working hard as a team to make sure the planned income comes in. And sorry, I didn't answer your question around the software, and I think it came up earlier in the meeting. Yeah, that will help transform the service. That will help, particularly the sort of the online interactions that applicants and consultees will have in terms of submission responses to applications. And so there will be some streamlining, there will be some improvements to services, but that's not there as an investor save. That is actually there to just improve planning services as a whole.
Because I wondered if we could get the planning applications moving forward quicker, then the volume would increase and therefore the income would increase. Am I just being too simplistic here?
Well, we're always keen to do that anyway. I mean, it doesn't change the statutory consultee timeline, so every application will still take as long as it does, and as ward members, you've always got that right to defer them to committee as well. So there is a timeline that was always set there, but it will certainly increase the initial stages when the applications are made and they're sort of allocated to officers. It will improve that bit, and we will start the process quicker as a result.
Okay.
So the current Civica software is, I think, 10 years old, Ross, I think. And therefore it's changing onto this will make a significant improvement. So it's things like one officer doesn't have to stand and feed the scanner with the documents and then physically move them across. The officer just goes, scans it through, and it pops up on their desktop, loads it up onto the appropriate file, and away it goes. So it will enhance the efficiency of that.
But just final point, we use a lot of agency staff to help to get rid of the backlog in the planning applications, didn't we? I thought that would have been an impact in terms of getting the software up and running, that we would save costs with agency staff. Is that not a benefit to be had? Because our own staff will be able to process more applications themselves.
Well, I mean, overall, it's bound to have a very beneficial impact on capacity generally. It's difficult to say with agency because obviously that depends what's happening overall with staffing, and if somebody leaves or then there's an ebb and flow in that. But the overall impact will be to increase capacity. So indirectly it should do that. But I can't say that specifically for individual officers and the job that they do.
Councillor Harvey is going to come in next, but just because we're talking about this very specific point, have we engaged with the Open Digital Planning team at MHCLG? Because I think we're experiencing the fact that the market is broken for line of business systems in local authorities. Local Digital in MHCLG is doing a lot of work on that, and specifically the Open Digital Planning team is trying to help local authorities take a different approach. And rather than, it might not be for us, but rather than just go to the market and get another not very good piece of software, it would be worth at least, maybe that's a recommendation of this committee, but I'm getting a sense that we're not engaging with that, so I do think that it would be worth doing. Councillor Harvey.
Yes, I was kind of wanting to come back on the send transport, and yes, it was a monkey that landed in your lap in year. So yes, it wasn't where it was originally planned, and clearly there are issues to do with you commissioning the transport services, but it doesn't seem to matter where you put it. It's kind of a one council problem, isn't it? Because you have to transport children who have SEND needs to the appropriate provision, and therefore having the right mix and balance and geographical distribution of provision is by its very nature going to impact on the cost of transporting people to those sites. So when everything was owned in children's, when the entire problem was owned in children's in terms of the budget sitting there for transport to commission to take young people to those facilities, didn't seem to work. Now it's split between two directorates, and we talk about taking a one council approach to things, but the lived experience seems to be that there's a heck of a lot of stovepiping that still exists in the way that directorates manage themselves and operate. So where is the assurance for us that moving this to where the transport services are commissioned is going to be a better outcome than having the costs located where the responsibility is also to balance and deliver the mix of SEND provision?
I think you're absolutely right, Councillor Harvey. It doesn't matter where it sits. In respect of the question that you asked, I'll caveat. It's about it being a gold project with the priority of the chief exec. He is personally in attendance and holding us all to account on a fortnightly basis and more regularly than that. But you're right, it's a one council approach. It's bringing together the expertise of legal services to understand what we are able to do. It's bringing together the data and information and insight from Liz Farr's team in terms of the expected cohort and need that is coming each academic term. It's bringing together the work of Ross's team, transport. Gemma Dando brings a lot of experience from her work in previous councils around this area, and it's bringing that close range financial lens to make sure that we are joining all of that information together and best using the data that we have. So I think that's what's different this time. It's a dedicated project. We've already demonstrated that commitment by stretching the target this year, and I think we will bring more updates as the results of that review identify that more detailed action plan in terms of that next stage.
Thank you. That sounds good. My granny always used to say, "Proof of the pudding is in the eating." So we'll just see how that goes. Just a couple of points. You talked about there being potentially a 500k saving to be made. Could we just, in terms of wrapping up on last financial year and thinking about the read across into the current financial year, given that 200k of savings was not delivered and that savings target was ported across into Ross's directorate along with the overall service, if presumably that 200k has been built into base. So is that 500k on top of the 200k, or is it actually a net 300k saving on what we originally expected? And did I dream it, or when PwC were providing us with sort of advice on the overall transformation programme, there's somewhere at the back of my brain that recalls that they were saying that they had some magic wand, clever kind of business model that they had developed as a consequence of working with other local authorities that was specific to SEND transport provision that they felt would be able to address our problems. And I kind of thought it was somewhere in the transformation programme mix, but I just wonder, am I remembering it correctly? And if so, what happened to that as an offer? And if we didn't take it up, why didn't we take it up?
Through you, Chair. So it's an additional 300k, and what I will commit to is when we bring the quarterly budget monitoring, we will present the brought forward savings plans and the current year savings plans with a detail and explanation of how they have changed from the original source in the approved 24-25 budget to how we've changed those and the expected sources of delivery from 1st of April 2025. In terms of the work that PwC did, there are no magic wands in terms of transformation. And I think what we all know here is that the approach to deliver sustainable savings for Herefordshire is unique because of our rurality, because of our population. And a one-size-fits-all approach by a national firm is not always appropriate and immediately deliverable for our county. So what we have done instead is we've taken the time to understand our own data, to work across those different directorate leads, and to make sure that the savings and the activity to draw out those savings is specific to our cohort of children, to our supplier market, and to the way that we want to deliver those services to children in our county.
Well, glad to hear we didn't drink PwC's Kool-Aid on this occasion.
Now that was the so there were 3 work streams that came through as part of that PwC work, as you recall, that your administration had put in place. I don't remember a send one. I remember there was one on calls, there was one on bins and something else. But we used them, listened to them, and they've fed into our transformation strategy as delivered a few weeks ago.
Okay, I am keen to move us on. Any other points on E&E before we move on to children's? Okay. Councillor Fagan, would you like to kick us off on children's?
Thank you. Yeah, I think actually what this report shows is that investing to save is actually a really good thing to do. I think that the improvements that we've seen in children's also correlate alongside the invest to save. So congratulations to everybody for achieving that. I think it would be great if the families that are homeless could also get a gold star next to them, just to say, and in terms of priority. I think one of the key areas around children's is, well, first of all, there's the issue of the dedicated schools grant, which I know that the override has been extended. I think it's until April for 2 years. Okay, so April 27, is that right? March 28. Okay. All right. Thank you. So, I think it would be good to explore sort of what that means, and also in terms of the work that's happening with SEND, and how, because they sit alongside each other, don't they? Because otherwise we could be just facing something that's exponential, the growth of the DSG, but I know that there's been a lot of work in terms of what we're doing with SEND in Herefordshire, so it would be good to sort of capture how that will impact the DSG, potentially, hopefully.
Go ahead.
If I pick up on the finance elements of your question, and then if I hand over to Liz to talk about the specific activity within the service. So you're absolutely right, the statutory override for DSG accounting treatment has been extended by 2 financial years. It was due to expire by the 31st of March 26 at the end of the current financial year. It was announced last week that has now been extended. Our cumulative deficit at the end of the last financial year, so at the 31st of March 2025, was 20 million, and that sits on the council's balance sheet as an unusable reserve as permitted by the statutory override. We've set a deficit budget for 25-26 of 20.2 million, so that means if we contain spend within that deficit budget, we will have a cumulative deficit on the 31st of March 2026 of 40.2 million. Now, to respond to those cost pressures, we have a DSG deficit management plan, and we're working closely with DFE through Liz's service and working with finance and making use of the capital programme to address some of those spend issues. But this is a national problem. You're right, it is exponential, but one of the key drivers is that lack of funding, and that's one of the things that we need central government to address and respond to. In terms of context, that deficit position for Herefordshire Council is at the bottom end of the scale. I think we're looking at 8 billion across the sector by the end of March in the current financial year. I don't know what that figure will be by the end of the statutory override period, but all it does is extend the period during which central government have an opportunity to respond to that challenge. We will continue to account for it in the same way as permitted by the override, and represent it as an unusable reserve in the council's balance sheet, and will continue to highlight that as a risk and compare it with the council's overall reserve balances in the event that that statutory override or intervention does not come along from central government. But that's just to clarify that accounting treatment.
Good. Go ahead, Liz.
Thank you. Hello, everybody. So yes, the service are working very closely with our finance colleagues, using the deficit management plan as a tool to try and manage spending. But as my colleague says, it's a really difficult position to be in. There simply is insufficient funding going into the system, as well as exponential growth in demand. And all of that drives overspend. We're working very closely on a number of projects, including supporting our schools as strongly as we can to support them to be inclusive. We know that the independent school sector drives some of the spend here in terms of fees. So we are also working with our property colleagues on expanding the number of places available to children within our maintained sector in Herefordshire. And we have a number of work streams running to try and reduce that independent school spend, which is a significant part of what drives that deficit. But ultimately, it is underfunded with exponential demand, and actually Herefordshire's position is fairly well managed, I would suggest.
I'm just going to jump in after you said that to draw members' attention to my declaration of interest that I am married to the principal of the Royal National College for the Blind, which is a Section 41 provider, and then therefore potentially one of the independent schools Liz was talking about. Go ahead, Tony.
Yeah, I just, so there were 2 points really. I think the impact of that on treasury management and how we deal with that, and then also just the connection to capital, how our capital investment can actually sort of help that program. So maybe if, Rachel, if we can do the treasury management.
Yeah, so one of the things that I should have said when I talked about the impact of the council, not only is it threatening our overall financial resilience in respect of reserves, but also this is £20.2 million out of the door this year outside of budget, so it's essentially an overdraft. The way that we manage the council's treasury position is we consider all elements of spending. We have one bank account and that manages all of the grant income and all of the payments, etc. So we have a daily cash flow management tool. We look at spend at the end of each day, and we move balances then into high earning deposit accounts, and we maximise our earnings and the way that we need to borrow as well. So we manage it in totality in terms of that treasury management position, but this will have an impact in the short to medium term, and all councils in the land are reporting that as a pressure. It's an unavoidable pressure, and we will do our best to manage our treasury position, maximising security and liquidity before yield as part of our treasury management strategy.
We've worked at pace to increase the number of places available in Herefordshire over the last 12 months in terms of capital investment and utilising under-resourced spaces. So you'll be aware that we've opened a number of small resource spaces across the county to support managing demand, specialising in the primary needs of ASD and SEMH. We've been successful with 2 bids to the department for the rebuild of Westfield School, which is beginning to start in terms of feasibility, and we are also promised an 80-place free school at some stage. We were successful in that. We continue to work closely with our property colleagues and are working on a project at Ryfield in Leominster to create a 40-place I do know that 40-place MLD provision as well, and then we also have a number of other projects in the offing to increase capacity across Herefordshire.
Councillor Stunnard.
Thank you, Chair. Can I come back and just to pick up on what Liz was mentioned about Westfield? I mean, Westfield is going to be rebuilt, very much building on the close relationship and the strong relationship that the school has with Leominster. The problem is that at the minute, what normally happens with schools being rebuilt is that you would come in, they would build the school on the sports field. Once a new school is up and running, they then demolish the old one, and that becomes a new sports field. Obviously, the problem with Westfield is that isn't available to them. There is no sports field around. So, as Liz was saying, we're looking at all options to try and keep it there so the school will stay in Leominster and build on those strong relationships.
Okay, on this topic, I'd just like to ask Councillor Studdart a slightly more strategic question, which is the government has punted the problem down the road, but it's still potentially a massive problem when we get there. So how is the Cabinet thinking about that risk? Are we basically assuming it's so, it's so significant that the government will have to sort it out? Should we start trying to build up reserves so that we can try and mitigate that money falling onto our reserve? How is the Cabinet thinking about that?
As you've seen, if you look at the corporate risk register, it's one of our biggest risks. It's one of our biggest concerns. And SEND, together with Home to School Transport, SEND Transport, and homelessness, is one of the 3 projects that I certainly sit very front and square on my slop chit to ensure that we need to come to address them. So SEND is significant. As Rachel just said, in March, at the end of next year, our deficit will be around about £40 million. Our reserves are 45. So effectively, if we hadn't had the 2-year extension and the government had said, you've got to pay, the deficit is yours, you've got to pay for it, effectively we'd nearly be bankrupt. Now, that's us, and we're actually in a very, very strong financial position. If that had been applied across the rest of the country, a significant amount of councils would have literally gone into 114 territory. So that's been resolved, as you say, by effectively the central government kicking the can down for another 2 years. What we are looking to do is address that, as we've said. So we need to get more provision. So at the minute we've got, I think Liz, it's 200 children, isn't it? So every day, 200 children leave Herefordshire and go either to Powys or into Gloucestershire. We need to get that provision now of those SEND schools. In fact, if we can get more than the 200, then what we can hopefully be is not in deficit, but in credit, and we can then hopefully get children coming from Gloucester, Worcestershire, Shropshire and Powys into us, and we can then reap that benefit. And that's our plan, and that's what we're going for. So we're very much working with Liz and her department to ensure that we get a clarification of where do we want this new 80 position school. Once that's in place, what we don't want to happen is suddenly DfE to say to us, we're ready to go, where do you want this? And we go, oh, we're not sure. So that's one of the bits of work we're doing. So lots of things going on. Definitely head not in the sand, address it square on, try and find a way around it, and deliver the best for all of the people of Herefordshire as we can do.
Just so that all makes sense, but as I understand it, in broad terms, you're attempting to manage the increase in the deficit, but you're not making contingency for, because whatever happens, we've got a deficit we're going to have a deficit at the moment. You're not making contingency for that deficit falling back onto the bank. You're just basically assuming the government won't let that happen. Is that?
Not quite. As I said, if the extension not taking place, then we were in a position to take it on. What we need to do is we'll take all steps that we can, robustly and strongly, to keep the deficit down as fast as we can. It's grown exponentially. In 3 years, it's gone from 6 million to 40 million. That can't be allowed to carry on. We need to control that, but at the same time, looking at provision so that actually we can reduce our costs by effectively bringing children back to Herefordshire.
I have many hands up, and I think Liz wants to join in here. So let me just see who I've got. Councillor Stark on this point, Councillor O'Driscoll on this point, Councillor Davis on this point, Councillor Harvey.
Oh, I think I had indicated
And Councillor O, can we hold you in readiness? So we'll just go down the line, starting with Councillor Stark.
Thank you, Chair. I know it's not a question for us, but I wonder how this 2-year override fits in with the multi-year settlement of 3 years, because it doesn't give you any stability. Are we going to make representations here through the LGA or whichever organisation we can to say that even with a 2-year override, it doesn't really fit the bill because we're going to have a 3-year funded settlement where the third year is going to be totally up in the air? I just don't understand how they've come up with a 2-year override.
Councillor Crockett, do you?
Yep. Thank you, Chair. First of all, the acronym SENS stands for Special Educational Needs and Disabilities for Information. So my thoughts or question is, what consultation or engagement has taken place with schools and other stakeholders to develop the plan to address the DSG, which is Dedicated Schools Grant, deficit? Thanks, Liz.
Okay, we'll collect everybody's thoughts and then we'll come back to you. So,
just for the sake of clarity for people at home and who might not understand exactly how things work, Rachel, you said we only have one bank account, and then we're talking about at the same time having a potential deficit of 40 million, or and if it carries on, it could be on the same trajectory in 2 or 3 years' time, it could be 80 million. So how can we have Schrodinger's bank account where we have an 80 million deficit and yet we're still earning interest on 40 million that we've got? So if people could understand how that works, the mechanism for that, without it being too complicated, I'm sure people would appreciate it.
Councillor Davis.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to pick up on the fact that we have 200 children leaving the county daily for SEND provision, and we only have plan at the moment for 80 within the county, consequently giving us 120 deficit. Is there any plans for increasing that number? And, you know, what's the time frame going to be to get this 80 internally done and get the other potentially an increase of another potential 200 places possibly, so that allow us to have children coming into the county as opposed to being exported out? Thank you.
And Councillor Harvey.
Yes, thank you. I'm referring to some text that we've got in the documents that are in the agenda pack for this, where it highlights significant future financial risk associated with the Dedicated Schools Grant, especially with respect to special educational needs provision. And it then goes on to say the Cabinet Member for Finance has stated the Council has reserves to absorb the 17.1 million Dedicated Schools Grant deficit without triggering a Section 114 notice. And I just wonder how bold stroke prudent it was to say that, and for that to be on record, because were I a government minister looking at that, I'd say, well, thank you very much. That's at least 17.1 million that I don't need to provide because you say you can absorb it. Would you care to comment?
Okay, we'll start with Councillor Stoddart, and Liz will have a lot to say.
So knowing that the deficit is now 40, I think that must have been from a year ago.
No, it was early on in the financial year. I think it was quarter 2 or quarter 3.
Okay. Well, at that point, when it was 17 million, it was absorbable because our reserves are in excess of 45 million. So we are easy. We could absorb that. As I said before, a few minutes ago, we could have taken 40, but it would actually then lead us very close to 114 territory. But there's no need for that because it's now been moved down the road 2 years.
Can we not? As a matter of good practice, can we not have our Cabinet member saying that on the record and then repeating it again in publicly streamed committee meetings? Because, you know, that's just the best part of £20 million straight out of our reserves, you know, because ka-ching, they can take it, can't they? They can say, well, you know, you absorb that, okay, it's doubled, but, you know, at least half of that is just going to stay sitting as a monkey in your lap.
Okay, I think the point is made. Liz.
Thank you so much. I think the other piece of the jigsaw here is we are expecting news in the autumn from government about reform to the SEND system. It's a shrouded secret at the moment in terms of how that might look, but every indication we have is that we are expecting reform. There are a number of factors that are driving this excessive demand in the system, included what is well regarded now as an outdated code of practice that governs parental preference and so on in the system. So I do think there is a case of looking to see what the autumn brings, which I think in part contributes to that extension of the override while reforms are announced and take place. My colleague asked earlier about the consultation around our SEND strategy and deficit management plan. So we have a head teacher reference group who we meet with on a termly basis, who are supporting us with the development of some of that work. I also engage on a termly basis, well, more often than that, to be fair, with our primary head teacher forum and our secondary head teacher forum, all of which are contributing. And actually, collectively, by working closely with the service, have increased capacity across Herefordshire by over 50 places in the last 18 months. I did just draw out some of the highlighted projects just in terms of the numbers of additional spaces that are going to be created. In totality, it is in excess of the 200 places that my colleague mentions. It is also, however, important to work equally hard on supporting inclusion in our mainstream schools. So we have a number of work streams supporting our schools to be highly inclusive, which will be a focus of the new Ofsted framework coming in the autumn. So we have specialist staff, for example, that are deployed to support our schools. We have a vibrant and active SENCO network where we meet our special educational needs coordinators and support them in practice in schools, and a number of other initiatives designed to support mainstream inclusion as well.
Councillor Fagan.
Thank you. I'm just wondering about our partners in the county, because this is not just an issue for the council, and I think particularly health partners. So we know that there's an issue with autism spectrum disorders, and various other issues getting diagnosis, etc. So how do we feel that our kind of partners are stepping up to assist in this area? Are we actually making progress, or is there just a bit of a stalemate? I also noticed today that the Herefordshire Health Watch was going to be disbanded, and I just wondered whether actually cuts that are coming within the NHS are going to create a difficulty in terms of this area.
We work really closely with our health partners. We've got strong governance with SEND, so we meet regularly at a partnership group and governance boards, and are all committed to delivering on our SEND strategy across Herefordshire. But the point is well made, and it is fair to say that health colleagues are under pressure, and we wait to see what impact some of that will have on waiting times, etc., for families and children.
Okay, I'm minded to draw. Okay, go ahead.
I just hadn't responded on some of those finance questions.
Yeah.
So I think to address some of the points that you raised, Councillor Fagan and Councillor Stark, around that use of building up reserves. I think what we've got to consider in this is what's within our control and what's outside of our control. So what's within our control are the activities that Liz has referred to in increasing sufficiency, working with partners, engaging with our wider network across the county in terms of reducing the pace of growth in this area. What's outside of our control is funding. We know that reform is underway, and we lobby actively and will continue to do so to make sure that a fair funding is achieved for the council. In terms of that option to build reserves now to anticipate that cliff edge on the 31st of March 2028, I do not know of any 151 officer or council in the land where that is an achievable or practical route to start now to build up reserves to manage a deficit of this volume. And I just wanted to clarify that the reason we are considering the deficit in the context of reserves is certainly not to say that we have sufficient reserves to absorb this deficit either at the end of the next financial year or 27 or 28. It's to highlight it and use it as a measure for risk. So if at the 31st of March 26 the override had not been extended, we advised in the Q4 report and indeed in the budget setting report what the level of our earmarked reserves was forecast to be at that point, remembering that our earmarked reserves, as advised through the adequacy of reserves report that we took in January, those reserve balances are held to mitigate risk in other areas around business rates, funding reform, our waste reserve, the budget resilience reserve, pension costs. So we are absolutely not saying, and I'd like this to be noted on public record, we do not have sufficient reserves to simply move across to manage this area of deficit. In terms of the council bank account, Treasury management and cash management across the council is very complex and becoming increasingly complex through acceleration of the capital programme, increasing budget pressures and the DSG deficit management plan, to name a few things. So we do have one bank account. We collect council tax income over 10 months mainly. So we have that 10-month fairly reliable estimate of what our cash inflow is, business rates in a similar timeline, and then we have government grants that are often reliable. Sometimes we are surprised with the timing of those government grants. We're managing that cash then and the management of the capital programme, the timing of our capital spend, which also includes VAT. So we're managing the recovery of VAT and the cash timing of that. We're managing the accounts payable, our suppliers, our debt collection, our income from fees and charges, etc. So it's incredibly complicated, and we monitor that on a daily basis. We forecast ahead for a year, we look ahead, we engage with the project boards around capital delivery to understand the timing of that, to make sure that we've got cash available, making sure that we can pay employees and suppliers within the agreed timelines. But it's a very detailed activity, and we place a lot of resource, and we look forward and backward and understand historic trends, and we spend a lot of time trying to manage that.
I'm very keen to move on. Councillor Harvey has her hand up.
Just a quick question, seeing as we're talking about money and bank accounts. Seeing as I'm also a parish councillor, and I know lots of ward councillors are, I noticed that the county council pays parish councils their precepts in advance in 2 6-monthly payments in sort of month 1 and month 7. Could you just explain the history to that, whether that's a statutory requirement that we do that, because we collect those precepts through the council tax, which means that we're in arrears in terms of our collection with respect to the payments that we make, and I wonder why we do that and whether that's a choice or whether that's an obligation.
Could you be very succinct in your answer?
The answer is I will look into that. I'm not sure of the history or the legislation, so I will come back to you on that and confirm why we do that and when that was agreed.
Good, because cash is king.
Absolutely.
Okay, I'm keen to move on. We are in our final half an hour of the meeting. I'm going to close children's there. I'm aware that Councillor Harvey wants to ask something about reserves. Councillor O'Driscoll wants to ask something about medium-term financial strategy. Councillor Bartlett probably wants to ask something about treasury management. Does anybody else have anything that's not been covered apart from those three? In that case, we will go in that order. Councillor Harvey, take it away.
Thank you. Yes, I guess I've got an overarching question. In press interviews or advertorials, as I referred to them in the cabinet meeting, the cabinet member made some bold statements about the financial outturn for this financial year, casting the outturn as a £500,000 underspend rather than the more like an £8.5 million overspend that was dealt with by moving money around between reserves and our budget line before the music stopped. And I'm just wondering if there could be a bit of an explanation of how the reserves were handled this year as opposed to last year, because I did have a look back at last year's outturn where an £8.7 million overspend was stated after reserves had been deployed in places. Now, looking at our reserves, £11 million of the movements out of our reserve this year are shown in the reserves in movements also, because money was moved from the business rates risk reserve and used to create a new reserve, which the cabinet member during the course of this meeting has referred to as being ring-fenced for adults and children's services, although actually the reserve is called the Budget Resilience Reserve in the way that the reserves have been published in the end-of-year accounts and in the agenda papers for this meeting. 4 million of which were used to offset in-year pressures that were encountered in the Adults Directorate. In addition to those 4 million, 2.3 million of reserves which had been set aside as part of the budgeting process in the event that children's were not able to meet the savings targets that had been placed on them that turned out not to be needed, have in the end of year accounts been stated as not going to be returned to the reserves as stated in the decision of full council that they should be. And we had 2.6 million more interest received on investments than was budgeted for. So 4 million from reserves, 2.3 million not returned to reserves, 2.6 million sort of net income that wasn't in the budget for investment interest, means that there was 8.9 million that kind of disappeared in the way that, I mean, I'm not going to use the term fudge, Councillor Cornthwaite, but in the way that the finances were handled in wrapping up the year, which just happened to allow £500,000 underspend in inverted commas, but actually it was after those monies were taken from reserves or not returned to reserves or received in unbudgeted for interest payments. So taking Councillor Bartlett's point from earlier on in the meeting, where she raised the expectation that we would need to spend to save or spend to deliver in terms of transformation and new ways of working. That Budget Resilience Reserve, certainly this year, and it was acknowledged in the things that have been said earlier on in the meeting, was used to plug up a hole that emerged in the figures during the year. And it wasn't actually invested in doing the kind of things that would mean that we'd either make savings in the future or would enable us to continue to deliver services in new ways that might cost us less or allow us to do more for the same amount. I'd just like to understand for this committee what the rationale is for this budget resilience reserve. We've taken the money out of the business rates risk, so clearly there's an expectation that we don't need that much money in there. But if we're going to spend it plugging the unknown unknowns, the holes that we didn't anticipate, and we're not investing in assisting transformation to take effect and deliver the savings that we expect of it or enable us to continue to do things in new ways, how are we using those flexibilities that those reserves give us to best effect? How can this committee be assured of that?
Councillor Stoddart.
Thank you very much. So, first point is, when we produced the paper, the reserve strategy, we made it very clear what each of those reserves are for, and we had done a full review of what we believed was the amount of money that was required to be in there. And we believed, which we presented to full council, and they all agreed, that £11 million was an acceptable level of reserves in that business rates reserve. What we also felt was that there was not a reserve to cover unexpected demands in children and adults. So it wasn't just adults, it was adults and children's. So that's why we put that £11 million in that budget resilience reserve. As I explained earlier, and it states very clearly, that is not to allow directors to spend that money. It is there to cover unexpected demands that they have not been prepared for. It's cut them out. And that's exactly what happened with adult social care this year. And that's why that 4 million went through. The difference between the year previous, which you'll all be aware was us delivering the previous administration's final year budget, was that we waited till the end, and then we went to find the appropriate reserves we could use to plug the £8.5 million. Last year, we're very clear from Q2 onwards that what we were planning to do, this is where it's going to come from, that's what it's going to do. And I think from Q3 and Q4 reports, they're actually validated, and you'll see it all the way through. So there was no underhanded, there was no fudges, there was no movements. It was very clear to all of you, as we, or certainly through Cabinet as we presented, and then as we presented it again. Rachel, do you want to say anything?
Can your follow-up be?
I will try and be brief. If I can reinterpret or interpret what you are saying, you're saying that there was some political advantage in phrasing the last year of our MTFS, of the previous administration's MTFS, as an overspend, and it was politically advantageous for you to phrase pretty well an equivalent overspend as an underspend, because you're saying that you forecast or you predicted that you were going to need to use reserves.
No, what we said was we followed the previous year's budget. We put in place, you may recall, in September of 23, we put in place very clear budgetary guidance to all departments and directorates of an overspend, of £500 or above had to be controlled by budget. So therefore, we started in Q1 with a 13.8 million overspend. We managed through significant controls to get it down by 5.7, down to 8.7, which we then had no option, but we had to then go and find reserves to balance. So that's what we did that year. What we did in last year's budget was we had 19 million of savings together with other activities we went through. When we got to quarter two, it then became quite clear to us that adult social services, CWB, were going to be overspent, and we therefore made it clear that we're going to use that reserve, the budget reserve of £11 million. We're going to use 4 million of it to cover that cost.
Okay, could you
no,
just
I'm sorry.
explain-
I'm sorry. We have.
Well, we have a financial resilience reserve as well as a budget resilience reserve. And I think it would just be helpful maybe for this committee to understand what the distinction is between the two.
I will allow just the answer to that technical question, please, Rachel.
The Financial Resilience Reserve was a reserve that was established probably about 5-6 years ago for general financial resilience across all areas of the council budget. The Budget Resilience Reserve was established in 24-25 specifically to support demand and cost pressures in the social care elements of the budget. Could it be merged? Absolutely. That might be something that we consider when we do our adequacy of reserves for the forthcoming financial year around quarter three.
Okay, thank you very much. I think we've explored that. I'm hoping that Councillor Driscoll and Councillor Bartlett think that their questions are not so pressing now. Councillor O'Driscoll doesn't seem to agree with that.
It was just when can we expect unless I missed it, when can we expect the new MTFS refresh to come forward after the LGA recommended it last week?
So it was always in our plan to produce a refreshed MTFS. We highlighted that in the budget setting report, recognising the risk and volatility in funding and reform this year. So that was explicit in the report that we prepared in February. It was always our plan. At present, the formulas have not been finalised. We've had some preliminary information, but at present there is no substantial information on which for us to base a more accurate MTFS. That information will come out through the next couple of months now, and we expect to bring a revised MTFS in line with our original plan to Cabinet in September.
September. Thank you.
Councillor Bartlett?
Thank you, Chair. I'm just looking for clarification, really, Rachel. So, as you know, I often think about the capital financing requirement in our Treasury management, and whilst we always say that we are well under-borrowed, so the underlying need to borrow for capital expenditure is what is termed the capital finance requirement. And my understanding is from the budget papers that we are around about just over 50% of our ceiling of 100%, if that makes sure, how much we can actually borrow because of the amount of revenue that we need to be able to pay it back. And this hasn't, so at the moment, this hasn't actually been, it hasn't been allocated anything outside of the minimum revenue position, which is a bit like paying off just the interest on a loan. If I'm, my point is, I think we need, I feel I need more understanding of the capital financing requirement, because I think we're building up pressure within our Treasury management where if we need to borrow large amounts for things that are coming up on the horizon, we might not have as much flexibility because we may not be able to have a policy that's going to be able to repay it properly. So am I just not understanding CFR at the moment?
So just to clarify, there is no magic ceiling at which we can stop borrowing. The way that we look at our borrowing is in the context of the revenue budget. What can we afford to repay in terms of our interest payable and MRP through the annual revenue budget, and we obviously don't just look at that in terms of a one-year view. We have to look at that over the lifetime of the borrowing. In respect of the CFR capital financing requirement, MRP, minimum revenue provision, I think in previous years our Treasury Management Advisors Link, who have now changed their name, and I think they are called MFUG, have previously provided training to Scrutiny Management Board to provide that extra clarity, and I think we have that as an annual offer, so if that's something that would be valuable to members going forward. But the line that is in the revenue budget in respect of that capital financing, that refers to our interest payable, that's linked to the capital programme, borrowing requirement, expectation of the timing of that borrowing and the corresponding MRP, minimum revenue provision, on the expected capital programme.
Apologies, Chair, I need to leave this meeting. Thank you.
And I need a lift, sorry.
Okay, we are hurtling towards the end of this meeting and we're losing members. Can we move on to recommendations, please? Sure. So, just in case people are watching this back and wonder where these recommendations come from, the members of the committee share draft recommendations on Teams to try and speed this up. Can I give members a minute or two to read them and ask for any suggestions for amendments, questions?
For the 25-26 savings, they were approved, the delivery plans were approved at full council in February. So I think what we've committed to is which is already underway, a presentation of the way in which 24-25 not delivered savings have been reorganised for delivery in 25-26.
That makes sense to me. It was Councillor Harvey who drafted it, if she's happy.
Yes, I think mostly the other savings that were being put forward in the budget were associated with the delivery of the improvement plan in the Children's Directorate. And I guess the question is whether there is sufficient information about that is in the public domain to qualify as a savings plan in the context of the other delivery plans that, you know, we still haven't seen yet. But
I mean, for transparency, we can include it all at the same time, just to let you know that by the time we report that at Q1, our external audit, which we're already in week 6 of, having published the accounts a month early, they will have tested, as part of our value for money work, they will have tested the robustness of those savings plans in detail. So that assurance will go to Audit and Governance Committee, I think, on the 27th of September, but we'll include those plans as well.
We all seem in agreement. Item 2, we will be having formal meetings, if we agree the work programme, to look at Q3 and Q4 outturns. What additional work would a working group do? I guess that's my only question. So I'd suggest dropping that, because that's going to be a substantial part of our work programme anyway.
the point of me suggesting that is that a working group or a task and finish group does not need to be comprised of the members of this committee, and it may be that there are members of the wider councillor group who are as interested as I'm sure all members of this committee are on spreadsheets and financially things. It just broadens the capacity of this committee and gives the opportunity for members of the council who are not on this committee but are interested in finance stuff to have the opportunity to be involved.
Okay, I see where you come from. I think I probably won't support that, though. For next year, we can factor it into that, but we can have a vote on that. Any other comments, questions, suggestions?
Just on number 2 then, Chair, are we going to put in there the committee set up a task and finish group?
Yeah, Chair. If you wanted members outside this committee, it would be a task and finish group.
Okay.
Chair's quite right.
If-
That's in addition to the Scrutiny Management Board review of delivery of the in-year budget. That's a separate review through a task and finish group of delivery of the 25-26 budget.
I mean, I'm not. I didn't draft it.
Well, with respect, I think the burden of detailed interrogation of this agenda item and comment in this meeting has not been evenly spread across all committee members. And my point here was to give this committee the opportunity to have a group with a genuine interest, the opportunity to have take a longitudinal view of this and maybe provide reports into this committee in a way that actually engages people who are interested in the subject.
Okay, it's an interesting idea. We will. I don't support it, so we will have a vote on that. Any more questions, clarification? Then
Your number 3, to increase the supply of affordable housing. We have got affordable housing. It's just not affordable. So I just think whether you want really or truly, genuinely, whatever. But
I'm happy. Genuinely, let's stick
I don't think affordable
Okay.
actually will help you.
Let's stick a genuinely in there. We will we'll vote on them individually. So can you read them out one at a time?
Okay. Yes, thank you, Chair. I was just going to suggest you did precisely that. So I will read them one by one and allow you to take a vote. There are 6 recommendations proposed by the committee. I shall read in turn as suggested. Number 1, to provide Scrutiny Management Board with the delivery plans for all undelivered 2024 to 25 savings that have been built into the Council's 2025 to 26 base budget and the savings to be delivered in the 2025 to 26 budget.
All those in favour? Against? Abstain? 1 abstention. Thank you. Next one.
Thank you, Chair. Recommendation 2. The committee set up a task and finish group to shadow the performance of Herefordshire Council and the delivery of its budget during 2025-26.
All those in favour? Against? Abstention? I don't think that's carried.
No.
Number 3.
3. The executive should model the necessary capital investment to increase the supply of affordable housing such that it will significantly reduce the number of people becoming homeless.
All those in favour? Against? Abstain? Thank you. It's carried.
Number 4. The existing financial facility to enable the Council to accelerate the delivery of Section 106 funded infrastructure be actively used by this administration.
All those in favour? Against? No, that was unanimous. So.
5. The Executive should ensure that there is no further delay in delivering the Planning and Regulatory Services Software Capital Project by urgently appointing a new provider to deliver the necessary software solution.
All those in favour? Against? Abstain? I think that was carried.
Yes, it was.
And the last one?
And finally, the Executive provides clarity on the difference between the Financial Resilience Reserve and the Budget Resilience Reserve, or the two reserves are combined and the scope and use of the resulting reserve is clearly stated.
I think that's actually been answered. Rachel did did briefly on what the difference was. We've agreed we can look at that and we'll take it through.
I'm sorry, we are past that. We'll vote yes or no. And all those in favour? Against? Abstain? Okay. Thank you very much. We do have a little bit more business. Could I propose that we extend the meeting by 10 minutes? Can I have a seconder? All those in favour? Against? Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you for your attendance and engagement. Okay, work programme, item 8 is the work programme. There are two things. I'd like to focus on the task and finish group initially. So you should all have seen and had opportunity to comment on the draft terms of reference. Any comments I've tried to take into account in what you see before you? Any comments, questions about the draft terms of reference? Councillor Crockett.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I've been doing one of these for my committee as well, and I just wondered if we wanted to look at a couple of additions. First one that I've noted is the background, but I was suggesting that it's background and context. We haven't got purpose in there, so I wondered whether that could be the second item. We've got objectives. Number 4, I was wondering whether we should have scope in there. So in scope or out of scope. And the 5th one, I think Councillor Bartlett might agree, governance and reporting. And then finally, a review of terms of reference as a standard.
So, are you happy to approve? Are you suggesting that we approve them based on the assumption we will incorporate those? Is that your proposal?
That's what I'd like. Yes, please.
I would be happy with that. Any comments or questions? In that case, the proposal is to approve the terms of reference subject to the modifications suggested by Councillor Crockett. All those in favour? Against? Abstain? Thank you. And finally, the work programme, there has been a little messiness with the work programme. What's published is essentially fixed dates for the next committees. What was circulated to you subsequently is a suggestion that we hold working groups looking at budget strategy and 2 aspects of the transformation programme between now and December, which would be the next formal meeting of the committee. And also we now have to think about where we will factor Hoople in. I suggest that we approve the work programme, the very bare bones work programme that is in the papers, and we will work informally to organise ourselves into working groups, which the scrutiny officer says is a perfectly legitimate way for us to work. Is that?
Absolutely. The one thing I would note though is that you are the programme that you're proposing between now and February is quite heavy. There are, as well as 2 meetings, you have 3 briefing sessions plus a task and finish group that you intend to finish by February. So that feels quite a tight timeline given the 4 committees and their work programmes. So I think as they produce their, I think pretty much every committee is proposing a task and finish group of some sort now. I would suggest that this committee exercises its powers informally to look at all of those and make sure that overall that the schedule of work for the next 12 months is sustainable.
Okay, so on the basis, I'm going to propose that we accept the work programme that is in the papers, but we will informally review whether we need further meetings, whether we need working groups as suggested, and how we will go about scrutinising the Hoople report that did not come today. Councillor Harvey?
Sorry, Chair, I just want to clarify that the scrutiny officer says that we've got 2 meetings between now and is it Christmas, or did you mean the end of the financial?
Yeah, my apologies. I meant
Yeah.
January, so it's 2 meetings then. That's during the period that the task and finish group is proposed.
Okay. Can I, Councillor Harvey?
Did the task and finish group get through the vote process as proposed?
Yes.
Oh, did
So, no, sorry, the task and finish group on inequality did. The task and finish group on the budget did not.
Okay.
Okay, I'm going to propose that we approve the work programme in the papers, but we will informally review what other steps we need to take, especially in the light of emerging work programmes. All those in favour? Sorry, Councillor Crockett.
Sorry, Chair. We're going on this recommendation A and B now. Is that right?
Yes.
Yep, because B is not right. Because we haven't got the work programme for other scrutiny committees on this document.
Okay, we'll take recommendation A, but not B.
Yeah, thank you.
All those in favour? Against? Abstain? Thank you very much. Our next formal meeting, unless we decide that we need a formal meeting before then for Hooper, will be the 8th of December. Thank you very much for all of your hard work.